This is Top Accolade Global News Update. I am Abiodun Mohammed. At least one person was killed and 12 others injured in two separate explosions that rocked Jerusalem city, according to Israeli officials. Israeli police said that the incidents on Wednesday morning are suspected of being a Palestinian attack. The explosions came hours after a Palestinian 16-year-old boy was killed by Israeli forces in the occupied West Bank city of Nablus, according to Palestinian officials. The first explosion took place at around 7 a.m. local time near an Israeli bus station along a highway on the western entrance into Jerusalem that is usually packed with commuters. 7 people were injured in the first explosion, according to medics, with at least 2 in serious condition. The second explosion, which officials described as controlled, took place less than half an hour later at the Ramoth Junction in northern Jerusalem. Officials said about 3 people were lightly injured from shrapnel. Top Accolade News gathered that police believe the first incident was caused by explosives packed inside a bicycle left at a bus stop. Both explosions were said to have been activated from afar. Israeli authorities have shut down major roads and set up checkpoints in both the eastern and western parts of Jerusalem as they conduct an investigation into the 2 explosions and search for the suspect or multiple. The magnitude 6.0 earthquake has struck western Turkey, the European Mediterranean Seismological Center (EMSC) said, while the country's interior minister said there were no immediate reports of deaths or significant damage. The quake was at a depth of 2 kilometers (1.2 miles), EMSC said. Turkey's Disaster and Emergency Management Authority (AFAD), which measured the quake at magnitude 5.9, said the epicenter of the tremor had been in Goyaka, a district in the northwestern province of Duce. Health Minister Fahrettin Koca said on Twitter that 35 people in Duce and nearby provinces had been injured. AFAD and media reports later updated the number of injured to 50. Most of the injuries were sustained during the panic after the quake, including from jumping from balconies or windows. One of the injured was in a serious condition, Soylu said. The quake struck at 4:08 a.m. and Turkish media said it was also felt in Istanbul and the capital, Ankara. Dozens of aftershocks were reported, including one of a magnitude 4.3. China's COVID-19 cases are surging toward record highs, signaling more pain for the world's second-largest economy as hopes fade for a quick exit from Beijing's draconian zero-COVID policies. The National Health Commission on Wednesday reported 29,157 infections nationwide for the previous day, close to April's peak. China's daily caseload peaked at 29,411 on April 13th, when Shanghai was several weeks into a punishing lockdown that prompted food shortages and rare displays of social unrest. The rising cases come as a video circulating on social media on Wednesday appeared to show fresh worker unrest at Apple supplier Foxconn's massive manufacturing facility in the industrial city of Zhengzhou. In the footage shared on video platform Kuaishou, people could be seen smashing surveillance cameras and windows, pulling down barriers, and arguing with hazmat-suited officials while chanting for their pay. Numerous former Foxconn workers have complained of food shortages and draconian quarantine rules at the campus, which is home to the world's largest iPhone factory. Top Accolade News gathered that 2 sources with knowledge of the matter confirmed protests at the Zhengzhou facility but declined to provide further details. More than half of Wednesday's caseload, which includes more than 26,400 infections classed as asymptomatic, were reported in Guangzhou and Chongqing, megacities in southern and central China, respectively, that are home to more than 35 million people. In Beijing, where authorities have shuttered schools, strengthened testing requirements, and restricted movement in and out of the city, infections hit a new peak of 1,486. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has challenged the election he lost last month to leftist rival Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, arguing votes from some machines should be invalidated in a complaint that election authorities met with initial skepticism. Bolsonaro's claim seems unlikely to get far, as Lula's victory has been ratified by the Superior Electoral Court (TSE) and acknowledged by Brazil's leading politicians and international allies. Still, it could fuel a small but committed protest movement that has so far refused to accept the result. Alexandra de Moraes, the Supreme Court Justice who currently leads the TSE, said in a ruling seen by Top Accolade News that Bolsonaro's right-wing electoral coalition, which filed the complaint, must present its full audit for both rounds of last month's vote within 24 hours or it would reject it. Brazil's currency deepened losses after news of the electoral complaint, closing 1.3% weaker against the US dollar. The currency was already suffering from investor concerns about Lula's spending plans and economic policy makers. Fernando Begalo, head of operations at FB Capital, was among many who said Bolsonaro's bid to challenge the election results seemed unlikely to get far, but that it would add to, in quote, pessimism on top of everything they already have. The United Kingdom's top court ruled on Wednesday that the Scottish government cannot hold a second referendum on independence without approval from the British Parliament, dealing a hammer blow to nationalist hopes of holding a vote next year. In 2014, Scots rejected ending the more than 300-year-old union with England by 55% to 45%, but independence campaigners have argued the vote 2 years later for Britain to leave the European Union, which the majority of Scottish voters opposed, has materially changed the circumstances. Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, leader of the pro-independence Scottish National Party (SNP), announced earlier this year that she intended to hold an advisory independence vote on October 19, 2023, but that it had to be lawful and internationally recognized. However, the British government in London has said it would not grant permission for another plebiscite, saying it should be a once-in-a-generation event. Polls suggest voters remain evenly split over whether or not they support independence, and a vote would be too close to call. The Scottish government's most senior law officer had asked the UK Supreme Court whether the Scottish government could pass legislation paving the way for an advisory second referendum without the approval of the UK Parliament. The unanimous verdict of 5 judges on the court was that it could not. The statue of a controversial German colonial officer in Namibia's capital, Windhoek, has been taken down after a successful petition. It was erected in 1965 in front of what is now the city's municipal building to honor Curt von François, who was celebrated as the city's founder. Von François was a senior officer in the then German colony of Southwest Africa between 1889 to 1894. He was the commanding officer in 1892 during the massacre of Onkrans, an operation against a rising rebellion by the Nama people, where at least 80 people, mostly women and children, were killed. On Wednesday, local artists performed rituals to reclaim the land where the statue stood before workers took it down from its pedestal. Activist Erected Titus, who led the petition to take down the statue, told news site Namibian that she was very excited. She said Von François had wrongly been called the founder of Windhoek and that he was a symbol of colonial oppression. That is the size of Top Accolade Global News Update. You can follow us on our social media platforms as displayed on your screen. Happy midweek.